Hey everyone, this is Coach Jackie, and I want to film a video for all of y'all going over the girls lacrosse field, the lines on the field, what they all mean, as well as some standard positioning for the start of the game and for settled offense and defense. So we are going to jump right into it. On the screen, you can see a standard field that we play for lacrosse. And starting off with the basic lines, these are your end lines, as with any soccer field, football field, anything like this. And then up here, you have your sidelines. So a girls lacrosse field can be played on its own individual field. Sometimes it'll be on top of a soccer field, football field, or even boys lacrosse field. But regardless of what field it's on, you'll have these four lines, and we play our game inside of those lines. Now, these other two lines here, these are our restraining lines. And what they essentially do is divide our field into thirds. You can see, let me get rid of that we have one section here, one section here, and one section here. So different from other sports, we do not play halves. We technically have thirds on our field. So definitely a unique part to girls lacrosse. Depending on the field we're on, there may be a line here in the middle acting as a midfield line, especially if the field is on a soccer field, football field, boys lacrosse field, because all of those sports use a midfield line. However, for our game, we do not. So that line does not mean anything for us. So you can just pretend that it's not there. It's going to be these restraining lines that are super important. There's important when it comes to offsides and positioning, but we'll talk a little bit about that later. All right, so next I want to talk about our bench area. So this area here is our bench area. You can see I drew in a little table. That's this black square down here. This is where our timekeepers, scorekeepers set up. Additionally, officials, our refs will be set up there. And for our teams, we line up on that sideline. So you'll have one team set up on this side, and you'll have another team set up on the other side. And then typically on the other sideline, that's where your parents will set up. Again, that depends on the field, but this is a standard setup for us to where you have one team on one side, another on the other side, and the scorekeepers table in the middle. Now, the highlighted box area, the reason why it is so important is because that is where you sub in and out of. So let's say this first X player here needs to get onto the field. They are going to move to this box area, and then they can go onto the field. You are not allowed to come from the sideline right onto the field. That is a big no-no for lacrosse. Again, you have to be inside of these two lines, that box area. The lines tend to be marked with cones or football pylons. We'll point it out to you at our first game just so everyone is aware of that box. So again, if you're going onto the field, you have to go through that box. Same thing, if you were on the field and coming off, you must go through the box. Reason for the box, one, so the timekeepers and scorekeepers know who is on the field. It helps with keeping an eye on stats, who they need to keep an eye on. Two, it's helpful for the officials. That's how they keep track to make sure there is the allowed number of players on the field. So that is our box set up. I'm going to erase all of this. Next, we're going to come to the center of the field. This circle here is our center circle or draw circle. This line in the middle is just marking the center of the field. That's where the people taking the draw will line up on. The size of the circle is going to depend on the field that we're on. It's typically a fairly large circle. Again, it's just all dependent on the field. All right, next I'm going to zoom in to one side of the field to go over the lines over here, since it's the same on the other side of the field. First thing I want to point out is this line here. This line is signaling our goal. So that's where the goal is. That's where the goalie is going to line up. Just want to make sure you guys knew what that was. Next, this circle around the goalie. This is our crease. And what the crease means is do not enter, essentially. The only person allowed inside of here is the goalie. No field player, whether you're attack or defense, is allowed in that section. Again, only the goalie is allowed in there. Now, coming off the crease, we have these lines here. This is our goal line extended, or GLE for short. GLE, goal line extended. And what it is, they just go out from the side of the goal, kind of a visual. They, however, do become a part of our 12-meter arc. So our 12-meter arc is another visual on the field for spacing purposes. Additionally, some fouls that are committed, you'll be placed on the 12-meter. I'm not going to go into the technicality of all the fouls. That'll be in a separate video or at practice one day. But this first line here is our 12-meter arch. Next, this here, this is our 8-meter fan. And this is arguably one of the most important parts on the field. Reason being, this section in here, that is our critical scoring area. Inside of that section, that's, as an attack player, you want to get in there in order to score. That's the section of the field you're most likely to score from. So if you can get into that section with the ball, you're mostly there to scoring a goal. Now, as a defensive player, you want to keep the attack out of that zone. If they're not in that zone, it's going to be really hard for them to score. So that's why that 8-meter is so important. Additionally, along the 8-meter, you see these hashes going around it. These hashes are more so just positioning purposes. If a foul is committed inside of the 8-meter, what happens is the attack player will line up on the hash with the defensive player behind her. Again, we're not going to be going through fouls right now, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but just know that if you are told to line up on that hash, a ref will tell you which one to go to, listen to your teammates, and listen to the coaches. It all depends on where you are in the 8-meter. So if the foul happens here, you're going to be going to this hash, the closest one to the foul. On the topic of hashes, we have these two hashes here that are not quite on the 8-meter. These are called our hanging hashes. They are the same thing as the hashes in the middle, to where they're position markers in order to line up on. They're just hanging off the edge a little bit. So nothing too crazy there. Going to erase these lines. Next, I'm going to talk about a part of the field that is not an actual line. This section back here, that is what the coaches call, what other coaches will call X, as in X marks the spot. X is an important part on the field. We always want at least one, ideally 2 attack players at X. This helps with spacing purposes, and it sets us up to feed others the ball in the center. So again, that's a crucial part of the field. It doesn't actually have a mark by any means, but wanted to make sure you guys were aware. Last 2 spots we're going to go over. This diagram doesn't have them, but there will be 2 dots here behind the goal as well. These are called dots, and similar to the hashes, if a foul occurs behind the goal line extended, the refs will tell you to line up on one of the 2 dots in order to restart the play. Again, the refs will tell you which one to go to. Some fields, they'll be really visible. Other fields may not have them, depending on where we're playing. So the ref will tell you just to go to a general area. Again, listen to your officials, listen to your teammates, listen to your coaches, and we'll direct you where you need to go. All right, so those are the general lines on the field. So next we're going to go through general positioning. So the diagram I'm going to walk you guys through is for a settled offense and defense. What I mean by settled is that it is calm, we're not in any rush, everyone is organized. I think organized is the best word to describe a settled offense. So we are going to have 2 teams. First, we're going to have Team Orange, which of course stands for Tabb, and we're going to say Tabb is on offense in this scenario. So we are the attacking team. So what we want in an ideal setup, we have 2 players, 2 attack players behind the cage, and then we have 5 players spread out along the top of the 12. And you can see there's a decent amount of space in between each of the players. Reason being, we don't want to be on top of each other. We want to give everyone room to work, spread out. The closer we are together, the harder it is to score. So keeping some space is going to be really helpful. A good indicator for space, you notice these top 5 attack players, they're all lined up along our 12 meter. So when in doubt, if you are one of the top 5 attack players, line up on that 12 meter. It's a really good visual to make sure you have enough space, you're not on top of each other, and then just make sure everyone's spread out evenly along it. As for our 2 lower players, we have our goal line extended here, and notice how they are behind it. We do not want them right on that goal line extended line. Rather, we want them back kind of in this zone back here, a little bit further off, not right on top of the goal, some distance between them. All right, so now I'm going to be putting in the defensive team, which is going to be the blue team. To start, we have the blue team's goalie. Pretty simple, always going to be in goal. Next, defense is going to line up marking each of the attacking players. All right, so that is a standard defensive setup. And I'm going to start with the 2 low defenders down here. As you can see, they're lined up right on that goal line extended. So that is also why these attack players here, we don't want them right on that line. We want them some distance out, so that way they're not going to be easily marked by their defenders, because their defenders are going to stay right on that line. Now for the other defenders, notice how everyone is outside of this 8 meter fan, right? No one's lined up in there. Reason being is because, let's say this top defender here, they line up in the center, that if you're not marking anyone inside of that 8 meter or the critical scoring area, it's actually a foul. You have to be marked up on someone, and if you're by yourself for 3 seconds or more, it's a foul and you give the other team a chance to score. So we want to make sure our defense, you're always lined up outside of that 8 meters, so then you don't risk getting a foul. So again, everyone's outside the 8 meter, everyone is matched up in a pair. This is a standard man-to-man defense. And that's as far as we're going to go into the positioning for today on a settled offense or defense. In person at practice, we'll go through following your players through, moving throughout all of this. Just wanted to show you guys a general, this is how we set up on a settled offense and defense. Now I'm going to erase all of these, and next we're going to go through how we line up at the start of the game or for a draw. So for following purposes, we have our Tabb team who's in orange, and we're going to say that they are attacking to the right. So they are trying to score on the right goal. And then our blue team, they are attacking to the left. This is going to help us with setting things up. So we're going to start with Tabb first. Since we are trying to attack this side, that is the side we want to score our goals on, our goalie is going to be set up on the other side. Pretty simple. Stand in the cage that your team's not trying to score in. Now, we're going to start, since we started with the goalie, we're now going to line up our defense. So you have 4 defensive players typically, and they are going to line up on the field just in a nice line. Notice how they're behind this restraining line here, and there's a pretty even amount of space in between all of them. Just our 4 players lined up, ready to go. Next, we're going to have our 3 midfield players. To start, we have our player who's going to actually be taking the draw. And then we have our 2 other midfield players who are lined up on the circle. Their job is to get the ball if it comes towards them. Next, we have our 4 attack players. Our attack player is very similar to defense. They're lining up along the restraining line, even space between them, ready to get the ball if it comes towards them. This is a standard setup for the draw. I'm going to put in the blue team so you guys can see how it all works together. So the blue team, remember, is trying to score on this side of the goal. So their goalie is going to be on this side. The blue team's defense is going to line up with our attack players. They're going to mark you up like that. And that's going to be the same across the field. Typically, everyone is going to be marked by someone. Everyone marks up in pairs. So those are the blue team's midfielders, and the blue team attack players are going to be right there with you. This is how we start the game, how we start every draw and every half. It's a pretty standard setup. The coaches may try some new things, but we'll walk you guys through that when we get there. But again, this is a pretty standard setup to get to. That is all we're going to cover in this video today. I hope you guys found it helpful. And if you have any questions, please reach out to the coaches.